Welcome to this week's video. Today, Peter and I will be talking about our options for the future in our life together. So we're going to be talking about different options that we have for ourselves, for Narrowboat Bandonian, for life on the canal. On, off, near? Let's find out. So Peter, we've been talking a lot about what's going to come, possibly in about a year's time?
Yes, as time goes on, you could see in the future it will get harder and harder to continually cruise and like go up and down the Wolverhampton flight 21 locks or the Hatton 21 or all that sort of thing. So we think about maybe being stationary a bit more of the year, but in a planned way rather than at the moment where it just happens. Like I can't get to York, so I'll have to stay at Marina for a while, and then that turned into a couple of months.
Yeah.
So
it's basically making plans as opposed to letting life just happen, I guess.
Yes, and we're still planning to cruise. Certainly I was still planning to get to York, so that's going to take a good part of the year, take us into the autumn.
Yeah.
So we're looking at things for, yes, maybe this time next year.
Okay. We've been talking all manner of options. There's marinas, Bankside moorings, there's leisure moorings, there's residential moorings. It's a bit of a minefield actually, isn't it?
Yes, I understand it a bit better than I did a few weeks ago. But
right, so if I outline each one, or if I mention each one, and then you can explain to us what it is. Okay, so the first one, it may be self-explanatory, but a marina mooring.
Yes. Well, when I first arrived at Marina, which is a very nice marina, very large, lots of facilities, I thought, maybe, in fact I even mentioned it in the office, I thought maybe I could come back here next year and take a permanent mooring.
Yeah.
And then as time went on, the thing about marinas came back to me, which is I was very lucky in that I had an empty berth either side of me most of the time I was moored. So when I looked out of the windows I could see other boats close by, but I could see the sky as well. But then when a boat came into the berth right next to me, that really cut off my vision in one direction. And one day I was sitting at the table and a movement caught my eye and I glanced up, and it wasn't somebody in the next boat moving about, it was somebody in the boat after that. And I could see straight through the windows on both sides of the boat next to me and into the next boat. And I just thought, that's not ideal. So I've had this thought before. I think in a previous video when I was leaving Scarisbrick Marina, I think I said on the tape that look at all these boats in a line, and that's the one thing I don't like about marina life. And you do have to move around a bit as well for legal reasons. They did explain to me at Mercia that's how they do it. You take a berth, but you don't own a specific berth. You own the right to have a berth, and twice a year you get moved. And the very good reason for that is that if you didn't, apparently, you would then become liable for council tax, as well as having to have a CRT license for the boat. So apparently this is a thing especially with the newer marinas, that the CRT, when they license them, do insist that all the boats have valid licenses. And of course we'd want to do some cruising anyway, so that's a cost that still has to be factored in.
Yeah, it's a very worthwhile cost, I think.
Yes, yeah.
So, okay, so that's marina life. Is it for us? Maybe not at this point in time. Though Mercia is one of the best that we've seen, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yes. I mean, they have some other options. I don't know if you could just buy a double berth, and so you always had an empty space on one side.
Yeah.
They do have one particular jetty. I meant to go and look at them, and I never did in the end. But they said you would have a narrow boat would have a jetty on either side of the boat, rather than one side and then water on the other. That would make it easier to do things like cleaning and the odd bit of paint work. But I'm not sure if it gives you any more space, any more free views.
No, I don't think so, because there'll be a boat the other side. You have to excuse all this noise. We decided to record this in the afternoon, and there's people mowing the lawn, trains going by, so just bear with us, and I hope that you can still hear us. He'll probably move out to the other end of the garden in a minute.
Yes, but we've been waiting for our old friend Jules Fuels to come by and top up my supplies of diesel for my new stove. So we didn't know what time they were arriving, so we couldn't start until after they'd been.
Right, well they've been now.
Yes.
So, Marina Moorings aside, the next thing, and this was our first, I suppose our first choice many years ago. When you've only been on the boat, how many years? 6 years?
Just 6 years.
Just 6 years, many years ago. But what we thought about then, and what attracted us back then, if we had to have a permanent mooring, is actually something called a Bankside mooring. Now, we've seen Bankside moorings in places like this, which are visitor moorings on the canal, but we also saw Bankside moorings at the bottom of people's gardens. We were moored up one summer in Apsley, and we were opposite some really lovely houses that had gardens that sloped all the way down to the canals, and they'd put little jetties and ropes and made it look really picturesque, and boats could moor there. You don't have the rights to that mooring, but if you've got a boat, you can apply to pay for a Bankside mooring at the bottom of your garden. I think that's how it works. If I'm wrong, I will, and I can find out, I will put a note up. But if you know, you can comment. But that is one of the options that we've talked about, is a Bankside mooring. So Peter, what attracts you to a Bankside mooring?
Yeah, well, it would be very nice if I was to sell my house in Hampshire and then get a house on the canal where you could tie up a boat at the bottom of the garden, because then it would be very easy to go cruising but also return home. It sounds silly, but one of the downsides is you need to find a property with a garden that's at least 59 feet wide. The houses that we saw at Apsley, I would have to get permission from the neighbours on either side to moor across the bottom of their garden as well to get this boat in there.
Right.
So that's one thing. Yes.
It's a very niche property that we're looking for, if that's the route that we decide to go down. Okay, so that's one of the options that we have been considering, but it would be quite a long search. We'd probably have to start looking now to see if that's going to be feasible down the line in 18 months, because as you know, and as we know, buying a property on the land doesn't come quick, and it doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come cheap. And
I would have to sell my place, and I would have to give notice to the tenants who are in there at the moment. So that would be that would slow everything down. The ideal would be, if that's the route we were going to take in the selling of Peter's property, would be to do it at the end of this current tenancy, whenever that happens, rather than in the middle. I'll keep an open mind on it, but it does seem to be perhaps the most complicated because it involves lots of multiple things that all have to happen in they have to happen in the right order. So I would have to get my house in a position where I can sell it, then sell it and secure the funds, and then look for somewhere else, and so on. So it all could take a while. But that's Bankside mooring with a house. So what is the other kind of Bankside mooring? Yeah. Well, these are things that I saw right away when we were very first on the boat. is a piece of land, normally on the non-towpath side, which is rented to boaters.
Right.
So they're either privately owned, or a number of them are owned by the Canal River Trust. The CRT has 3 different grades of moorings alongside the water, and depending on what facilities you have, some of them you literally just have the right to tie up alongside the canal, and then you have to make your own arrangements to go and get water, else and rubbish disposal. Everything is down to you and involves movement. On the other hand, some of them, like where we are, can be very nice. Little stretch of land behind the boat. The mooring has land going up to the hedge by the road. We're right next to a CRT service point, so there's water, and rubbish. All those things I mentioned are all right there. And it's right outside the village, so there's a bus stop on the road right outside the entrance to the moorings. There's a fence with a locked gate for security, and they are available. They're very hard to get hold of. I discovered you can go on the website, the CRT website, and look for moorings, and if you see one you like, you can tag it so that if it becomes available, you will be notified, and then either they will tell you this will be coming available and this is how much it costs a year, or they'll have an auction, and then it'll be down to, you have to put a bid in. And apparently, Marianne was telling me, it's very similar to the way that eBay auctions work, in that you have the option of entering the maximum you're willing to pay, and then let the auction app increase your bid if someone outbids you.
Up to your maximum.
Yes. So that's another way of doing it. I don't know much yet about private owners, but I've seen some very nice facilities. They look like a farmer has taken the edge of a field, and quite often they've laid on water because they have water to the field if it's used for grazing. And you can have access a track, so you can bring a car down. And then the other thing to watch out for is some places apparently have rules about no permanent structures or even semi-permanent structures on your little patch that you're renting. Other places allow you to put up sheds. So you do see some very nice ones with a garden shed with solar panels on the roof, plants growing, and or a summer house, and then you've got plenty of storage for, well, if they're using coal, that they can store that, or logs, and so they can be very nice indeed.
Yes, and we're opposite some moorings at the moment, and some people have done just that. So they look very attractive, and it is quite an attractive proposition to us, I think. Yes.
If I can find one, then I will be very interested. Some of them are not so good. I mean, I saw the one in Gas Street Basin, and that's a residential mooring, and I thought, heart of Birmingham, that could be interesting. When I looked at it, I could see what looked like a set of boats which had been lashed together, ready to be dragged off somewhere, and that was actually the mooring. And it did say on the information, you can't choose which position you have, and you'll have boats either side of you, and you have to reverse into the spot. Now I get on and off of this boat from the front, so that would be, that's a non-starter.
I think that's probably the worst option, that particular mooring in Gas Street Basin that you've discovered. because
Yes.
at least in a marina you can choose which end of the boat you get off of, and you're not tied and tethered to other boats. In this instance, I think all the boats were tethered next
They
one
were,
to another.
yeah.
So if you want to move, you've got to negotiate with your neighbours
Yes.
to be there in order to let you go, and then they have to close up the gap probably.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work, but anyway, so that was one particular type of mooring,
Yeah.
but there are others.
Yeah. Finding out about the privately rented moorings, or even sold, we did see a plot on the northern edge of Banbury last time I was there that was for sale, and it was quite a nice piece of land. It would have, around a semi-detached house, it would have made a good sized garden. The only trouble was it was right next to a busy road, so I thought, no, I wouldn't at all be interested in that.
Talking of busy roads, that's exactly where we are right now, so this is not our permanent mooring.
Yes.
Okay.
The road's fine, it's the railway and the lawnmower.
Yeah. Okay, so that takes care of the marina, the Bankside mooring with a house, or thereabouts. So we have toyed with some other options, and they involve either changing narrowboat Bandonian for a different boat, or finances allowing keeping both, one on a permanent mooring, a narrowboat Bandonian for cruising, much like people do. They have a house and then they have a caravan or a mobile home, and then they go off and they do things. So so that is one of the options that we've been looking at. And what is it that we've been looking at for the other boats?
Yeah. There is boat sales in Mersey Marina, and so we had a look around there and chatted to the guys who run it, and we did look at a couple of wide beams, pretty new ones, and they were 12 feet wide. Now, when you're inside, it's very attractive because there's lots of space, and they can be beautifully equipped. And you, because you have a wheel rather than a tiller in the widest ones, the back of the open cabin can be used for dining, because you have seats all the way around the back. And again, for a while I thought, oh, this would be really nice. But when I stood behind the wheel of one of these boats, it didn't move them, of course, didn't even have the engine running, but thinking, how on earth do you steer this around some of the canals that I've been on where I know wide beams are allowed? I mean, where I am now, when I leave here in a few days, I'll be heading back down towards Burton-on-Trent and going round to head north on the Trent and Mersey. And almost immediately wide beams wouldn't be able to go that way because there are narrow locks.
Yeah.
And the narrow locks cut the country in half, so you have to choose on a wide beam, south or north, and then you can be also quite restricted. The license is more on a wide beam, and it's going, it started off being 5% more, then 10% more, and I believe it's going up to as much as 50% more in a few years' time. Licenses are going up anyway because the CRT is looking for funding because the government funding is being slowly withdrawn.
Yeah.
But that's a factor. Yes, even on something like the Grand Union, which is a wide beam canal, I've come around bends in my boat and seen a wide beam coming the other way. I think there's not much room.
Yeah.
And one particular place, because I know that the company here had a boat for sale at Leighton Buzzard. Now I know Leighton Buzzard quite well. In fact, we did one of the lockdowns there, one of the shorter ones. But just on the northern edge of there is, I think it's Wyvern Boating, but they own close on 40 hire boats, and when they're not out, they're moored 3 deep along the non-towpath side of the canal, and maybe 10 boats, one after the other, nose to tail. So it's quite a long stretch, and I think that would be so stressful, because you'd have to make sure that there's no one coming the other way, and you can't see.
No.
Even going through in a narrow boat, I was always pleased to get past there, because I thought if I meet a wide beam coming the other way, one of us would probably have to reverse.
And it's probably going to have to be you. You're a dab hand at reversing though, aren't you?
And the same thing applies with tunnels.
Yes.
You know, a lot of tunnels like Blissworth, Braunston, all those tunnels, you have to arrange passage through them in a wide beam. And I've been told by wide beam owners, you end up arriving the night before and then going through in the early morning. So they close the tunnel to normal traffic in one direction so that the wide beams can get through.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot more stress.
But then if you went down the wide beam option, I'm thinking that you would probably choose the north or the south, and then look for a wide beam somewhere in a permanent mooring, and that's where you would stay. And then narrowboat Bandonian would be the one that you would be able to cruise with. But I know that your thinking is, if you own a boat, you need to move it.
I would feel a bit of a fraud if I had a boat that was just basically
I know, that's your
floating
personal
flat.
Yeah, your personal view.
And the other thing is, having 2 boats, especially if you're looking at Marina, that's quite an expensive option.
It is. So I think we've probably ruled that one out, but it is one of the options we seriously considered, it, particularly when we were at Mercia, and we had the luxury of actually looking around the new wide beams that were so gorgeous and offered so much space. And you can get wide beams from, is it 10 foot is the narrowest, or at 7?
I think they start at 8.
8 foot is a wide beam, but an 8 foot wide beam or a 12 foot wide beam, the license fee is still going to be that of a wide beam, which is, as Peter said, about 50%.
Well, it is. I thought there was just wide beam, but it turns out they are graduated.
Oh, right.
So, because we also looked at some online at some 10 foot wide beams, which again are very nice, a little bit easier to manage around places like the Grand Union or possibly the canals up here.
And it would offer us the amount of space that we would be looking for if we were to upgrade to a wide beam. 10 foot or 12 foot, 10 foot would be fine.
I think in a 10 foot boat this year, the basic license difference is something like £163. So
Right.
so you do save something there. But you still, when you get to a double lock, you still have to open both gates. And so it's a bit more work and it's more stress. So
We're trying to eliminate stress. That's
Yes.
why we're on a narrowboat, actually. But you'd be surprised, for anyone that thinks that living and working and being on a narrowboat is plain cruising and stress-free, think again. It has its stresses, they're just different stresses that you have to deal with. And it depends on your personality and what you can cope with as to...
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because just below the camera there's a very elegant little dachshund standing on the bank
Peter gets easily distracted, especially by dogs.
watching the seabirds and watching the water birds.
Yeah, so I've lost where I was now. Yeah, so stresses are on a narrowboat. You can't avoid them, but what you can do is have the right mental attitude to deal with them, and that's the same whether you're in a house or whether you're on a narrowboat. So don't come onto a narrowboat thinking, oh, it's going to be stress-free, because it isn't. But we digress.
Yes.
That is, we're not talking about why we're on a narrowboat. We're talking about future-proofing. So we've discussed marinas, Banksides, wide beams with permanent moorings, wide beams moving. House with mooring at the bottom of the garden, we've talked about that as well. It was out of sequence, my fault, sorry. Now this is something I wrote down but I haven't actually spoken to you about, but you may have read it. It's buying a house somewhere in close proximity to where you moor the narrowboat, but not actually being at the mooring, such as at the bottom of the garden. So for instance, if if you moored in a marina, or if you moored on a bankside, but you actually lived in a house and then you went to the narrowboat and moved it whenever you wanted to. So that is another option, but we haven't spoken about it, but I thought I'd write it down because it is in the mix.
It feels, again, it would feel different.
Yeah. You wouldn't be a boater then, would you?
I like, well, I always feel that some of the problems that some people tell me about with the boats, I don't see because I'm on the boat all the time.
Yeah.
Things like security.
Diesel bug.
Yes, yes. I mean, people, if you, as a lot of people do, you find a nice spot, tie up, and then go away for 2 weeks. If there are people there with dishonest intent, they soon notice that that boat is not being attended to. And also, if you do it in the winter, everything gets cold, and then you've got to warm it all up again when you come back to it. So I quite like the idea of the boat being in use all the time if we've got using it.
I think those were all the options that I had written down. Of everything that we've discussed, the bankside mooring seems the most favourable.
Yes. Yeah.
But then that brings us to the decision, where in this beautiful country of England or beautiful country of Wales do we actually find the bankside mooring? And that's quite an issue really, because you mentioned about the CRT having a list of places. In your research, how many free bankside moorings were there on the CRT website?
I think
in the whole of the country?
Across the whole of the country there were just over 100.
So yeah, so that is really quite a difficult thing to find. And on top of that, you don't know where those moorings are, or we don't know where they are at the moment. We'd have to look at each one, find out where in the country they are, because we know some of the country and where we might like to stay and where we might not like to stay, depending on where our families are and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I did look, when I saw that number, I did look into some of them. That's how I found 2 of them were in Gas Street Basin. Some of the others, well, it doesn't really matter about. When I looked into them, I know this place. I've been past it several times. That doesn't appeal to me at all. You know?
Yeah.
So maybe that's why there were available slots there. The popular ones, that's where they might auction them off, and you just basically have to join a waiting list. I don't know yet. I haven't found a way to find out about privately owned moorings. Apparently the magazines like Canal World sometimes do advertising features on available moorings, and I guess once you've got in touch with the owner of a mooring, you could then just say, well, if anything comes up, let me know. And it would be a good idea to start now, because it might take some time to find something really nice.
Yes. So the search is on for a bankside mooring a little bit further down the line. In the meantime, we are gearing up to me moving onto the boat probably during the summer. I have some things to do at home first, and for those of you who follow the channel regularly, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Wish me luck on that one. But it's a very exciting prospect to spend that time with Peter. The amount of times I could have said that. So yeah, it's going to be quite exciting, and we are going to be looking at the space inside the boat. Is it going to be big enough for the 2 of us? 2 of us, yes. 2 of us plus instruments and crafts and clothes. Maybe not. We'll have to look and see what we're going to be doing. But it is an exciting prospect. I'm really looking forward to it. And we've got all these exciting plans and decisions to make.
Yes, yeah. Been looking at the boat around the inside to see how things could be moved around, what changes you could make.
Yeah, that'll be in another video though.
Yes.
So I think we've covered everything on my list. If you've got any suggestions, any comments, please feel free to leave them below the video. I really enjoy reading your comments, and I do respond to all of them. I'm trying to build up my subscribers, but really I just want to make my videos for people who enjoy watching what we do. And if that's you, I'm very grateful, and I thank you for being a subscriber, a viewer, or just for watching for today. Thank you very much. So I think probably we should wind it up there.
Yes. Just one more thing I thought about.
Oh yeah.
For a Bankside mooring is it would be, after the experience in the last hour, it would be nice to be somewhere where a fuel boat comes past.
Yes.
Because now I need diesel for my stove through the winter. It's nice to have a regular supply,
Right.
and to be able to run the engine. I mean, a lot of things I used to get from fuel boats, I don't need kindling anymore, and I don't need bags of coal. In fact,
Fire-lighters.
yes, firelight. I don't know if this is rambling, but say the boat that came by, Toaster, was Jules Fuels, and it was Julia and Richard, who were the first people I ever bought from on a boat. I was sitting at Berkhamsted, and they just came down through the lock, and I waved them down. But Richard always has a chat, and I was saying about the diesel stove, and I said getting a bit old to heave 25 kilo bags of coal around, and he said, well, that's why we now carry 20 kilo bags.
Yes.
Because a lot of people are feeling the same. You know, the
All the boaters are
population's
getting older.
and the boater population's getting older. So sooner or later we'll be carrying little plastic bags
Of coal.
and running backwards and forwards.
So yeah, we're trying to future-proof while still enjoying the canals. It still has a lot to offer us, and we've just got a lot of plans and ideas. Me particularly, in what I want to do whilst on the boat, and it's just a question of putting plans in place to make it all happen. You've got to dream big, live small. That's what the channel banner says. So I'm dreaming extremely big, bigger than a narrowboat, but live small. That's the hard bit. You've accomplished it, but I haven't yet.
Yeah.
So I think we'll stop there.
Mhm.
So until next week and next week's video, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.